Welcome back. Ed Husic is the Labor MP for Western Sydney and also Secretary of the Labor Caucus Economic Committee. He's also in Canberra and he's going to join me to talk about the budget from the other side of the chamber. Welcome, Ed Husic.
How you going, Janine?
I'm good. Now, could you just update us on what exactly happened? As I said in the last interview, as I understand, the school bonus has passed the House, just passed the House. Is that correct?
Yes, it did. I mean, we had some sort of drawing into obscure parliamentary practice to try and stop it and delay it, but ultimately we were successful in getting that measure through, and that's a big deal, particularly for families out my way. About 15,000 families will benefit from that, so it's great news. What
do you say to Senator Cormann's charge that you're ignoring democracy, parliamentary procedure? I mean, what is the rush to get it through right at the moment if the economy is sound and it's fine? What's the rush?
Well, because we've announced obviously the measure for next year, but what we've figured is that we can, because if we'd announced the measure for next year, people would then, the next question would be, well, why can't you do it for this? So basically we've been able to fast track all that and get this payment so that it can be processed this year and get money into people's purses and wallets to cover those education costs that people know as they're paying for them, they can do with that money.
And is it another bonus that it's then off the books you can get that surplus up for next year without this?
Oh, well, there will be all sorts of people will read all sorts of things into it. But, I mean, the key thing for us is, you know, people will say, oh, will you expect a bounce out of the budget? I mean, I don't know. I don't have too many people rush up to me after budgets waving and cheering.
They might when they have a cheque in their hand.
Yeah, sure. And there'll be a lot of families that will welcome these changes and also the other changes that are in there. But from my perspective, the big thing was, and I know you and I have had this discussion previously, and you've had a very strong set of views about the surplus, but from my perspective, being able to have fiscal policy rebalance, take into account the economic conditions we're in, and free up the room for monetary policy to be loosened up, I think is a big deal, and it's good. And certainly, really, it's over to the RBA now. I think a lot of businesses that I talk to feel that we can get a bit more easing on interest rates, and they certainly should be taking heed of business sentiment in relation to that.
Okay, I'm going to get to the interest rates. That was going to be my next question. But I just want to ascertain, I wasn't as strident on the surplus. I thought it was worth pointing it out. All credit that we have got a surplus, and given that the Coalition was calling for one ages ago, I was arguing. It's just, I must say, the European situation, just before we go to interest rates, my concern always was to be cutting at a time that you're could be going into difficult times was not good for growth. Now, you couldn't have banked on, I guess, what happened last weekend. How concerning are the events in Europe for you right at the moment?
Well, I think people have been concerned about uncertainty in Europe and elsewhere for some time, and it's always been something sitting in the background, but that's why having this surplus has been important, giving us a degree of economic security that if things should turn, we've got a surplus there behind us. But again, you know, coming back to it, I think the best thing that we could have now to basically give growth a further kick along is further interest rate cuts.
Now,
and
just on
certainly that should be in the RBA's scope and view. Yeah,
well, it should be, but as we know, the RBA is a law unto themselves, and their scope and view seems to be a rear vision mirror, as we've seen recently. But the big question at the moment, though, is that no matter what the RBA does, really a lot depends on what the banks pass on. Now, they've passed on about three-quarters of it, but at the end of the day, whatever you do, whatever the RBA does, is it frustrating that you're really at the mercy of banks which are just thinking profits and return to shareholders?
Yeah, it's hugely frustrating, and I think the banks are cutting the nose off to spite the face because, you know, heightened economic activity that would come as a result of these interest rate cuts flowing through the broader economy would actually help banks, and there's very little reason, you know, they'll be claiming increased costs themselves, but people have been poking holes in that argument. I think there's an economic interest for banks to pass these cuts through as well, as I said, through heightened economic activity.
Now, the criticism, as you know, business is claiming there was nothing in it for them. I have some arguments when they didn't support the mining tax and they knocked 1% corporate tax cut rate as being, you know, not worth it. But the overall impression, though, and it's a fair call that they have been left out, there hasn't been anything to spur the economy, to spur growth and productivity. Now, given your area, the key here is that you've got to get business to employ people. They really are the most crucial, even more than the RBA. Does it worry you that business is so negative that nothing's been given to them, or there's been no impetus for them in a difficult time?
Well, I reckon it's what sector of business you talk to in terms of size. In terms of small business, there'll be a lot of small businesses that'll be happy that they'll be able to instantly write off $6,500 in terms of asset write-offs, and also $5,000 for vehicles like cars, utes, and also the loss carryback. That's a bit of great news for businesses that are restructuring in the face of changing economic conditions. So there'll be businesses, 2.7 million small businesses, 110,000, for example, potentially benefit from the loss carryback initiative. In terms of the corporate tax cut, you know, I certainly welcome any moves, and we haven't ruled it out in terms of going and revisiting this as well. But given the way that the numbers are in this Parliament, you've got the Coalition ignoring business and refusing to pass this tax cut on. We've had the Greens refusing to pass it. There's a mentality in some of the Greens that you use tax as a punishment rather than recognising that, you know, having more competitive tax rates are great for the economy, great for us competing internationally. But it depends, as I said, Janine, you know, which level of business you're talking to. I can understand some businesses are upset, and they should certainly vent that to the Coalition. And we've tried to do something different in terms of channeling some of that spend elsewhere to business.
They seem to be venting it at you at the moment, but look, is there a frustration, just on the politics for a moment? I said last night in my little rant, that in all my years covering budgets, I'd never seen on the day of a budget, the morning, the afternoon, and hours beforehand, that the lead story, even on Financial Wires, was about Craig Thompson, not about the budget. It was the second item. Again today, the selling of what many in your constituency see as a good thing is being overshadowed again by this Thompson thing. I mean, it must be frustrating. You must feel like you can't get a trick.
Yeah, I think it is. You know, from my point of view, people often will say to you, let's talk policy. What are the things that we need to get done in the country to, you know, deal with the issues that we've got at hand now and into the future? You try to get them done. I mean, we had, for example, massive aged care reform. This will be a big deal, particularly for people that are concerned about the treatment and the care for their parents in years to come. These are big moves that have been made, and it is overshadowed by this obsession about you know, this overwhelming focus on these other issues. So,
well, I suppose the argument is you've got to get rid of the issues.
Yeah, and we slowly, well, I was going to get to the point too that I think we are making some headway in relation to that, but, you know, we just, ultimately, you can either sit and, from our perspective, we can either sit and whinge and complain about the circumstance or just get on with the job, and in a number of areas we are, and getting back to budget surplus has been a critical economic objective to reflect the times we're in, and I'm glad that we've reached it.
Okay, now one very quick one. We've only got a minute left, but I'm always fascinated on how your efforts on getting those nasty overseas software suppliers who are gouging us on prices, how close are we to that inquiry, Ed Husic?
Well, I'm very pleased to say that Minister Conroy's agreed to hold the inquiry, and we are in the process of finalising the terms of reference, and hopefully in the next few days or so we'll be able to release those terms of reference, and it will provide two things. One, an opportunity for consumers to basically outline, both businesses and others, you know, what an impact this has. I think this is actually a drag on businesses and an impost on their costs. And it'll also, if I can say, for those big companies, give a chance to educate the public on the factors that they believe drive their pricing decisions. But at least we've got it out in the open now.
Good on you. And that is all credit to you when that's announced, because I know you've been battling. And that's another bonus for business. So there you go. That's a good thing.
Absolutely.
Ed Husic, thanks for your time tonight.
Thanks, Janine. All the best.
That's all we have time for, but I'll be back tomorrow night with our end-of-week panel with the business reaction to the budget. Now they've had time to digest it all and tell us what we might have missed. See you then.